Gary, we have been asking every week, probably since Christmas, maybe even before, can Arsenal go on to win the title? You were steadfast, you said no. You thought it might come down to mentality. Is it about mentality? Is it about ability? How do you see it in terms of defining where it's gone wrong for Arsenal?
Look, I think obviously, other than the game where they played against Manchester City, you'd have to say that Arsenal are more than capable of getting results in all those other games. There's some tough games in there, but there's no doubt that in the last few weeks it's become very difficult for them. And I think it has been about mentality for them in that 5 or 6 week period. I think they'll look at that run of games and they'll regret it. You know, they didn't have the distraction of FA Cup, Carabao Cups, Europa League. They've had a really free run. They couldn't have been in any better position. I know people will point towards the 1 or 2 injuries that they've had, but that's something that will happen at any point in the season. And I just hope those players are in that position again one day, particularly those younger ones, because they will look at that and they'll be feeling really down about it and thinking, have they let an opportunity of a lifetime pass up? Because where people were 5 weeks ago, and even there was a point, Dave, I have to say, where you did ask me about Arsenal, and I was wilting a little bit myself, thinking, actually here, they're getting close here. They're actually 9 games off, and their form was good. But it's just left them, everything's left them in the last 5 or 6 weeks, and they just haven't had the experienced players, I don't think, in the squad to help those younger ones get over the line.
You played in a team that up against Newcastle in the mid-90s, and that team was saying they threw the title away, they bottled. Did you think it's a similar sort of situation with Arsenal?
I do think there is an element of throwing the title away because of the nature of the defeats that they've had, being up in games, 2-0 up in 2 games, losing against obviously losing 3-1 against the bottom of the league. Yesterday, what happened? There is an element of here. In 2023, we don't use the same emotive language that we have done in previous years. There is no doubt if this was going back to the Kevin Keegan era, this would be described very harshly. This Arsenal team would be being attacked now for what's happened in the last few weeks. But we're obviously a lot more conscious and a lot more aware of the language that we use around it. However, what we've got to say is that at elite level, at high performance levels, you have to make sure you perform. You know, whether it's the Augusta and it's coming up the last, or whether it be sort of the World Championships at snooker, or whether it be the Olympic Games, the biggest moments of the sort of most pressurised environments, you've got to deliver in those moments. I always doubted whether this Arsenal team could, just looking at some of the things that were happening. You know, the over-celebrations against Aston Villa. I look at little things that might look a little bit harsh. Zinchenko, after the game against Bournemouth, I think it was, celebrating an hour after the game with the fans outside and screaming. You want your leaders in the team who have been there before to actually spread composure around the dressing room and to calm everybody down. You don't want them to lift the anxiety and lift the emotion. I've said about being cold and a title running, and I just think there's an element of emotion. Xhaka at Anfield, Partey, I think, losing his form in games and getting caught on the ball in difficult moments. And then I think from that all in, it's become very tough for them mentally. I think mentally it's caused them a big issue in the last few weeks.
But you were both really critical of Arsenal in this studio almost exactly a year ago when they were beaten at Newcastle. Do you actually accept that this has been an extraordinary season for them and one in which they deserve praise rather than negativity?
Dave, we never had them in the top 4. Our predictions are there for everybody to see. We did not have them in the top 4. I said a few weeks ago on television, I think we're at Forest. I think this has been an exceptional season for Arsenal to finish second, because I never had them anywhere near this, and neither did anybody else. I think the problem, obviously, for some people is that ultimately now it doesn't look like a good season because of where they've been. And they'll find it difficult themselves to think that it's been a good season because they'll think they should have won the league. But overall, I think it's been an outstanding season to do what they've done.
So we talked about the mentality side of it, Jamie, but on the pitch, technically, where have they fallen short?
Defensively, that's been the massive drop-off. And when you think of title winners and you go through from, you know, when I think it plays in my position, big centre, Vincent Kompany, Virgil van Dijk, Vidic, Ferdinand, Jaap Stam. You know these figures, John Terry, these figures of sort of...
Ferdinand.
I've mentioned him. These real big centre-backs. Now, when I look at Arsenal centre-backs, I don't think they've quite got one of those just yet, and Saliba may become that. And there's been a lot of what you mentioned before, players missing. Now, I want to look at sort of Arsenal before the World Cup, after the World Cup, and also with and without Saliba, who was outstanding. So I just want to look at Arsenal's defensive record, because this is where they completely let themselves down. So this first sort of breakdown here is, let's go to the top here, before the World Cup. So games 14, you can see the 11 goals, which was the best in the league. Clean sheets, best in the league. The amount of times they conceded 2 or more goals, second best, and they've got best points per game. After the World Cup, still with Saliba in the team, let's not forget. So, again, we've got Saliba here. Games 13, goals conceded 14, which is not the end of the world, but you've gone from the best in the league to 10th. That's a massive drop-off. Yeah? Clean sheets, they've dropped a little bit. The amount of times they've conceded 2+ goals, 12th in the league. So 5 times in 13 games, even with Saliba, they conceded 2+ goals. Now, that tells you that after the World Cup, they were looking completely different
Points were there,
defensively.
though, still.
Yeah, so you look at the bottom, they're still getting the results. So you're talking about the Aston Villa game where they come back, the Bournemouth game, these games. So they're still top, but there's signs that they're conceding goals. Then, without Saliba, they drop even further. They go to, obviously, 12th in the league. Whoa, what's happened there? Still learning on this. The amount of times they conceded 2+ goals, this is a huge one. 5 times, 12th in the league, and then the points per game has dropped. So that's where they've lost it. And with Saliba, they've had the points. They were still at the top of the league. But this idea that they weren't conceding goals or looking vulnerable with Saliba at centre-back is a myth. And I just look, and it's not pointing, this lad out, because I think he's got the potential to be a Virgil van Dijk, a Vincent Kompany, a Rio Ferdinand, that sort of figure